I keep seeing news articles about how much rural Germany supposedly hates clean energy. I mean, look at this. Even the chancellor has been hating on wind turbines.
Weil sie hässlich sind und weil sie nicht in die Landschaft passen. Das ist eine Übergangstechnologie.
It seems like a lot of people are saying, nice idea, but not in my backyard. And then I stumbled on this little village outside Berlin, which is going the opposite way. Not only did Veltheim go fully renewable, but it also has its own separate power grid. The locals don't fight it, they support it.
Ich finde die Idee, dass sich der Ort selbst mit Energie versorgt, finde ich super geil.
We went there to see how Veltheim pulled off its green transition and why its residents are on board. At first glance, Veltheim pretty much looks like a street surrounded by a lot of fields. Okay, the name is starting to make sense.
Der Ortsname ist vielleicht auch genau deshalb gewählt worden, weil einfach der Wind hier so schön lang pfeifen kann.
This is Michael Raschemann. He was the one who got the ball rolling by building 4 wind turbines here about 30 years ago. Over time, that slowly grew into this giant wind farm. There's also this biogas plant that uses organic waste to produce clean electricity and heating. When it gets too cold, this wood-fired heating system jumps in. Then there's a solar plant and this big battery. All of this infrastructure produces hundreds of millions of kilowatt hours of electricity every year, more than enough to supply Veltheim's tiny population with clean energy. Less than 1% of the renewable energy produced in Veltheim is actually used here. Power from the wind farm goes straight to the residents through an independent grid, which means it's very cheap. People here only pay 12 cents per kilowatt hour. For reference, I pay nearly 3 times as much in Berlin. Taking all fees into account, my monthly bill of 50 euros would come out to 15 if I lived in Veltheim. And that cheap local power is the reason why residents are such big fans of the huge wind farm in their backyard.
Es ist total wichtig, dieses kleine Mängelchen an Energie, 1 Million Kilowattstunden hier vor Ort abzusetzen, um die Akzeptanz für 99,5% ins Netz zur Verfügung zu stellen zu bekommen.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back to the 90s, when this same guy brought the first turbines to Veltheim. Michael Raschemann was still an engineering student back then. It was so momentous that local TV even covered it. He saw potential here. The village's vast fields were pretty high up for this flat part of Germany, great wind conditions, and there was already a power line close by. It was also a rural area in former East Germany struggling to find its place in a newly reunified country.
Alles ist abgebaut worden, Arbeitsplätze. Die Leute mussten immer weiter fahren und das passierte nichts. Und dann kam da ein Student und sagte, er will hier 4 Windräder bauen.
People were curious and chatty.
Die haben sich was zu sagen. Das heißt, man kann irgendwo eine Information streuen, die ist relativ schnell überall.
An intense dialogue started. I like to picture it like one of those town hall meetings on Gilmore Girls. Raschemann talked to the local government, residents, and the farmers' cooperative, which administers a lot of this land. Together, they agreed where these wind turbines could be built without bothering anyone. For example, by placing them far enough away so they don't cast a shadow on the houses. That was phase 1. Lots of talking. And as Raschemann and his wife founded the company Energiequelle that slowly expanded the wind farm, the talking continued.
Das ist eine langsam gewachsene Struktur. Es sind zwar auch mehr geworden, aber die Bürger wurden irgendwie immer informiert, beteiligt.
This is Sebastian Herbst. He's a Veltheimer and the head of the Agricultural Co-op, a group of farmers who share land and equipment to make farming easier and more profitable. And this co-op is also in the clean energy game. Because right around the time the wind farm was growing in the early 2000s, farmers were in a tough spot. Their income was unstable, partly because the EU lowered minimum prices for a lot of their products. And the oil they used to keep the facility for these babes warm was expensive, so they thought, let's diversify. They joined forces with Energiequelle to build this plant. It uses manure from livestock, crushed grain, and corn to produce biogas.
Kann man eine kleine Qualitätskontrolle machen. Wenn wir uns den Mais angucken, dann sieht man hier die Maiskörner. Und je höher der Körneranteil ist, natürlich je mehr Energie.
Wie sah das jetzt aus? Gut?
Das sah ganz gut aus, ja. Also die letzten 2 Jahre waren vom Maisertrag eigentlich ganz gut.
The plant captures potent methane that would have otherwise escaped into the air and turns it into a more climate-friendly fuel for electricity and heating.
Wir konnten dadurch Arbeitskräfte sichern, auch Perspektiven, neue Arbeitsplätze geben. Das ist total wichtig. Im Moment haben wir schlechte Milchpreise, schlechte Schweinepreise. Also die Stimmung in der Landwirtschaft ist gerade katastrophal. Und man freut sich eigentlich, wenn man jetzt so eine Biogasanlage wie jetzt hat.
But there is one final step that Rashomon believes really sealed the deal for locals, saying goodbye to big energy and lowering the prices. Before 2010, all of Feldheim's green energy flowed into the public grid. Residents had to buy it back from the power supplier, paying grid fees and surcharges on the electricity produced in their village. The local renewables company Energiequelle tried to avoid these extra charges by purchasing the local section of the power grid, but that did not fly.
Die Antwort war sehr schnöde, aber auch nachvollziehbar. Tafelsilber wird nicht verkauft.
So Energiequelle cooperated with the local government to build an independent electricity grid in 2010. As in, they built their own power lines and all. But the locals wanted more. They also wanted access to renewable heating from here. That's why they joined forces with the municipality, businesses, and farms to build their own heating network. Each household invested 3,000 euros into this energy transition. And there was some money from the state and the EU as well.
Das ist eine gute Lösung, günstige Lösung für alle gewesen.
This move made Feldheim one of a kind in Germany, to the point that it attracts visitors from around the world. Today, there are more than 180 bioenergy villages across Germany. They get most of their power and heating from clean sources, mostly biomass. Some of them are close to 100% renewable. But what makes Feldheim unique is that unlike the others, it's completely off-grid. The village runs its own heating and electricity network independently. And that really paid off in 2022. When Russia's war in Ukraine plunged Germany into an energy crisis, Feldheim continued to enjoy steady electricity and heating, and it was affordable. At the peak of the crisis, Germans paid an average of 45 cents per kilowatt hour. Feldheim stayed down here.
Das finde ich echt wichtig, dass es auch gemerkt wird, ach guck, der Strom wird dadurch günstiger, dass die Dinger so nah an mir dran stehen.
Not only did longtime Feldheim residents accept clean energy in their backyard, more people are moving there because of it, like this guy, Jens Neumann.
Hallo.
Hallo.
Hallo, ich bin Beatrice.
Hallo
freut
Jens,
mich.
hallo, herzlich willkommen in Feldheim. Schönen guten Tag.
Dankeschön.
So.
He and dozens of newcomers have been living in this house that opened in 2024. And he's wasted no time and got Feldheim written on his ID, even though it's now technically just a district of a different town.
Damit die Leute wissen, wenn sie mich dann mal kontrollieren müssen, okay, der wohnt nicht einfach nur in Treuenbrietzen, der wohnt sogar im energieautarken Ort Feldheim. Und hier steht's drin.
Ein stolzer Feldheimer.
Auf jeden Fall, auf jeden Fall.
As for the wind turbines, he can barely see them from his backyard, or porch.
Baut der ruhig aus. Ich sag, wenn meine Stromrechnung so bleibt bei meinen Hobbys, die ich habe, mach, ist okay.
Because those hobbies he's talking about, they're very energy intensive and have racked up quite a bill in the past.
Mir wurde mal gesagt, dass ich halt für 2 Leute Strom verbrauche. Das sind, also im Jahr habe ich bei der alten Wohnung 2400 Kilowattstunden verbraucht. Aufgrund der Technik, die hier dann auch steht, die braucht halt auch ein bisschen Strom. Ne?
Das heißt, Sie freuen sich auf die neuen Feldheimer Preise?
Ja, auf jeden Fall. Ich gehe da relativ entspannt jetzt ran an die Geschichte. Und weil der Strompreis mehr als halbiert worden ist.
But as popular as this approach is in Feldheim, it can't work everywhere. There are specific circumstances that made it thrive here. It's a tiny district with a very curious, tightly knit community. It doesn't take much to organize people here, and the power lines from the wind farm to the homes can be very short. The Farmers Co-op is also deeply rooted in the community and has a lot of influence. Similar conditions exist in the Isle of Egg in Scotland, or the US's Kodiak Island in Alaska, which also run their own microgrids on renewables. But for larger towns or communities that lack the natural advantages that these places have, trying to do the same thing would be much harder. That doesn't take away from the fact that planners did a lot of things right in Feldheim. Studies show that communicating effectively from the beginning makes a huge difference. And that locals need to see that it's making them some money, or at least helping them to save it. Germany does do that in many places. There's a law that allows operators of renewables to pay municipalities affected by the project, but there's no obligation for developers to share the profits. These are voluntary payments. That uncertainty can fuel resistance, and it comes at a moment when many are questioning the government's commitment to a renewable rollout. Feldheim can feel this trend, for example when it comes to subsidies for its biogas plant.
Feldheim lernt gerade, dass wir ein bisschen Angst haben vor der Zukunft. Das EEG läuft aus. Das vorgeschlagene Flexibilisierungsprogramm der Bundesregierung ist schlecht, ist nicht kostendeckend.
So even in Feldheim, the work is never done. Plants need money to stay profitable. A new generation of more powerful turbines needs to be installed.
Und da ist wieder wichtig, die Feldheim mitzunehmen, diesen Gesichtswandel zu verstehen und bereit zu sein, zu akzeptieren.
This unassuming place knows how to do that by communicating, creating job opportunities, and providing unbeatable prices. It may not be a formula that's easy to implement everywhere, but it allowed Feldheim to achieve its energy transition decades before Germany could even dream of completing its own.
Would an approach like this work where you live? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to our channel.